Hey, 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 it's me, it's G, and here is another article for your temporal disruption. Yep, health is wealth, not just physical health, but also mental health. And I want to give you something to think about. People are driven by one of two things if we step outside of the framework of love and fear. Then what we have to realize is that there's more going on than we understand. You're either driven emotionally or factually. Now, either one can get you to the end, to the right kind of solution. The question you need to ask yourself is, how Machiavellian is the process? Anyway, here's an article from AmericanThinker.com written by Monica Schulter. Swedish child climate activist reportedly a tool of corporations. Let's read. Kids are great tools for big money and major powers lurking in the shadows, attempting to enact a political agenda. And this is a story about the human shield. Who is fronting, who is promoting, and who is hiding behind the propaganda? The latest instance, and it's a doozy, is young Greta Thunberg, the Swedish child climate activist who's coming to the United States with a big carbon footprint. She is coming to the United States to persuade us all to jump on the global warming, now renamed climate change, because not everything is warming, the cavalcade of green laws to restrict our own freedoms. Here's something to think about. We're all aware of the need to be environmentally friendly. We're all aware of the need not to pollute. But be careful with the zero waste race. The only way to truly achieve zero waste is to have zero production. It's interesting. I'm not saying that it's always a bad thing, but think about the consequences. Restrict our freedoms, which, as it happens, will coincidentally make green elites even richer. Now, I don't like articles that make broad, sweeping statements referring to ill-defined people as elites without specific examples. It's not good journalism, which is sad because this article makes good points. Let's continue. No wonder they're the shadowy forces bankrolling her. What's that word? Peregrinations. What does that even mean? According to a report that ran in the Times in the subscription-only section titled Greta Thunberg and the plot to forge a climate warrior. This, for an article that wants to be factual, there's a lot of emotional language here. Um, Green corporate energy companies are looking to turn a profit from green contracts, and these people are behind young Greta's much ballyhooed rise from the beginning. Yeah, you don't get to the UN without powerful friends. And some people are so invested in the children being the way forward that they don't see the forest for the trees. Hey, how can you even nominate a child for the Nobel Peace Prize when scientists who have spent 20, 30 years in laboratories trying to cure diseases and interpreters and translators have smoothed over conversations their entire lives, and all these people are passed over? Yes, but you need to have someone up there. Yeah, but you need to have a proven track record. You need to be intellectual. You need to be able to argue from the other side and not in an overly emotional way. Far from being some persuasive and charismatic kid out to save the earth. Look, we all want to save the earth, but we need to save ourselves first. The Times has found out that the Greta phenomena has also involved green lobbyists, PR hustlers, eco-academics, and a think tank founded by a wealthy former minister in Sweden's social democratic government with links to the country's energy companies. Again, there's not enough facts here, but it's a well-founded point. You have to ask yourself when use of a person becomes abuse. These companies are preparing for the biggest bonanza of government contracts in history. The greening of the Western economies. Greta, whether she and her parents know it or not, and they are, her parents members of Antifa, which is the opposite in many areas of what it says it is, whether she knows it or not, she is the face of their political strategy. When children become your leaders, wisdom is relegated. Someone's looking for a payday, and sure enough, that someone found exactly the useful fool they wanted for a get-rich-quick scheme to line their pockets. Young Greta, as the narrative in the press goes, was discovered by social media entrepreneur Ingmar Renshog of a social media site called We Don't Have Time. He got her name from another activist who had been auditioning for Fresh Green Faces. It's all theatre, you see. Renshog, it turns, was trained by Al Gore's green energy groups and wanted to make money the way Gore did on green energy contracts. And just coincidentally, Greta's mum wanted to sell a book about how green activism saved her family. Save your souls, people. It's a religion. Renshog put it all together and bango bingo. Greta just spontaneously appeared out of nowhere to sell the world on global warming. Well, there was a sort of rise. It wasn't really from nowhere, but you get the point. Here's what the Times reported on who Renshog really is. Trained by former US Vice President Al Gore's environmental group, the Climate Reality Project, Renshog set up We Don't Have Time in late 2017 to hold leaders and companies accountable for climate change. There's a bizarre statement. Hold leaders and companies accountable for climate change. By leveraging the power of social media. Here we go. He and his Chief Operating Officer David Olson have backgrounds in finance, not environmental activism, which doesn't mean that you can't care, right? Renshaw, as the founder of Leaka Consulting, an investment relations company, and Olson with Svenska Bostadsfonden, I think, one of Sweden's biggest property funds, whose board Renshaw joined in June 2017. The platform's investors included Gustav Stenberg, whose family control Kinnevik, one of Sweden's largest investment corporations. You see, these are the facts. In May last year, Renshaw became the chairman and Olsen a board member of a think tank called Global Utmaning, Global Challenge, yes. Its founder, Christina Persson, is an heir to an industrial fortune. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're bad. You know, the writer is kind of fighting against the thing that they're arguing for. Bizarre. You get what I'm trying to say, right? You can't paint everybody with the same brush. Anyway, it's more nuanced than that. The list of corporate luminaries and green hucksters that follows in the background to this global challenge angle is stunning. These people are all looking to make a buck on the Al Gore model. They saw how Gore became a green billionaire and they want a piece of the action too. How very useful to have a little spearhead for this project in the persona of young Greta. I don't think she knows that she's being used. It's about par for what's going on these days with kids, corporate and foundation and even global superpower interests. Use them by selling them as stars to the low information voters as spontaneous talent sensations. Did you know that Greta had a coach? It's been going on for a while, but the pace seems to be now accelerating with social media, and it's becoming a template. Yeah, push the kids out. We saw an early instance of this phenomenon pioneered by the Soviet Union in 1982 when young Samantha Smith wrote a letter to Soviet leader Yuri Andropov, a former KGB chief, and got invited to the USSR to serve as a Soviet propaganda tool at the nadir of the Cold War at a time when President Reagan was applying the heat. Yeah, there was also the babies out of incubators story that was presented by a child, which then started a war. Children of illegal aliens are easy tools for the open borders industrial complex out for state funding for services. What's that got to do with anything here? That's a reference to a previous article. Okay. When you're here illegally, you do anything to not be sent back to your homeland. You become putty in the hands of activists. Could say that about anybody anywhere, really. The Parkland kids, high schoolers organizing protest against guns in the wake of a mass shooting became easy tools for Soros front groups. Money made, Harvard admissions secured. Yeah, that's true as well. You know, let those in the know present the information. You need objective perspective. As the Times concludes, for energy titans in Sweden and elsewhere, saving the planet means government contracts to print the green stuff. Money. Green energy lobbyists are using populist scare tactics and a children's crusade to bypass elected representatives. But the destination is technocracy, not democracy. Profit, not redistribution. Both of which have their problems. Greta, a child of woke capitalism, that's true, is being used to ease the transition to green corporatism. It's not all bad. And yet, we have to be careful. Kids don't rise to massive fame on their own with huge media coverage without big corporate money or powerful special interests there first. The Greta phenomenon is as fake as all the other instances of child manipulation. One day this kind of exploitation for dollars will be denounced in the history books as a particularly disgusting kind of child abuse practiced in the late 20th and early 21st century by avaricious and backward robber barons. Please stop using this emotional terminology. But right now, it's just moving towards peak exploitation from money men in the background, another bubble that will eventually burst. Luckily, reading the comments online, not everybody is agreeing with it, although there's a very thin line, as I've stated before, between highly active environmentalism and eco-fascism. There's a thin line between doing what you can and what you must to save the environment and doing what you can and you must to save the environment no matter what. Crazy, huh? Kids are great tools for big money and major powers lurking in the shadows, attempting to enact a political agenda. Did I read that? I've lost my place. Anyway, the last... it seems that was written before in the article. It's repeating previous information. Anyway, the point is that Greta Thunberg, the Swedish pin-up child climate activist who some churches are calling the new Jesus, it's ridiculous. It is a religion. If it's not factual, it's a belief. If it's a belief, it's a religion. Anyway, she's being used to persuade us all to jump on the global warming cavalcade of green laws to restrict freedoms. Wow. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Crazy, huh? Anyway, it's hard to process it. I mean, the cognitive dissonance is everywhere. It's important to understand that we need to think carefully. There's an agenda in everything. Don't think that the intelligence services don't have their claws in the social media as much as they have in all other kinds of media. Be aware and beware of what is pumped out and produced. People want you to think a certain way. Not everybody, but yeah, there's money to be made from fear and security, right? So think about it. Keep it in mind. Keep it in mind. Look into the background organizations. Look into how Al Gore made his money. Look into his family. Look into the fact that his film An Inconvenient Truth was thrown out of British schools because it was found to be so factually inaccurate. Beware of documentary propagandists that use the word if, if, then, if, then, if, then. It's all fantasy language. And language is a great tool for affecting and afflicting people's minds. The way you think matters. The quality of thought matters. Anyway, that's enough from me. Go away and think about it. And remember that, as always, health is wealth. Speak to you soon.